That's James's dinner. It's a Bulgoghi BBQ, baked potato, and some power bowl and some other stuff there. And I'm going to talk about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Legends of Tomorrow, 5th season, and the Marvels.
Is Aquaman the guy with the long hair there?
Oh, yeah, and I put them in the wrong order. I'll tell you this. This is actually on the bottom, and this is actually on the top. The Marvels got the top of the stack. I put them in the wrong order there. But,
so were you going to review those, or are you going to trust me to review them? I haven't seen them.
You haven't seen them, but all I'm saying is, like Legends of Tomorrow, this one's, they're kind of doing the funny thing where they have different, I mean, they even have fictional characters, right, that they haven't worked just totally with history, but they're saying some fictional characters. Like they have a Freddie Myers, who's a horror guy. So it's like Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. And
Michael Myers, that's a weird combination.
Yeah.
You're talking about the comedian?
No.
Oh,
you don't watch horror movies. No.
Not a big fan.
Okay.
Pauline's a big fan of horror movies. Or at least she used to be. Not so much anymore, right?
Well, I watch them still. Yeah. Anyway.
Is that Samuel L. Jackson there?
Yeah.
There we go. So he's playing Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. still, right? With the iPad?
Yeah, but it's interesting. This young lady here, Miss Marvel, she's already looking kind of chunky. So I don't know if she's going to be like a body positive sort of role model for kids or something. I don't know.
Okay, there we go.
No, the little girl.
Oh, okay. That's Miss Marvel or Ms. Marvel?
Yeah.
Okay. This just looked like Miss Captain Marvel's
She
costume.
is. Yeah, and that's her.
Okay, so she's Captain Marvel.
Yeah. So anyway, it's the main problem with Aquaman is the character the actor that they got to play Aquaman.
Yeah, he's
he's
a handsome kind of guy.
Yeah, he's handsome, but he's like steroid sort of handsome. He's like got the big muscles, and he looks honestly kind of fat. Steroid muscles.
Well,
like the
that
football
happens.
kind of player.
Yeah, exactly right.
Wrestler, so if there was a wrestler sort of wrestler superhero, then he could play him. But Aquaman should look like an Olympic swimmer, honestly.
Yeah, and he was clean cut too back in the day. Now, I do have to notice here, this is Marvel here. What happened to representation for white males? I see 3 women, 2 of color, and then a male of color. Hasn't it gone just a little bit too far? Like, let's just have, because people are actors here. What happens to white male actors? They get discriminated against.
Anyway, so
shocking.
You have a lot of time, 25 minutes, to talk about whatever you want to talk about. If that happens to be some of like the superhero stuff, maybe it's a DC versus Marvel thing. Maybe that's why I like this one more. I don't know. But anyway, go ahead and talk.
Okay, folks. I noticed this interesting place. I hope it's changed its name. Komsomolsk na Amore or something like that. That's Komsomol was a kind of like the Boy Scouts, kind of like for the Commie Party in the so-called Soviet Union. They didn't really have Soviets, and the Union was imposed with a very iron fist. And that's on the Amur River, the lower reaches of it. I'm pretty sure they've changed the name, and of course that wouldn't have been the original name if it actually existed before the commies started throwing up cities that probably didn't have much reason to exist. I mean, I see a place called Okhotsk. Maybe it existed back there. Oh yeah, there's Magadan, northeast of Okhotsk. And I probably got the accent in the wrong places, but Magadan was the center of so it's on the Sea of Okhotsk, which is way off in Siberia. It's a kind of like not so much an arm, but an offshoot of the Pacific Ocean. That's how far east it is. And Magadan, I think, was the center of quite a thriving community of political prisons. And believe me, the collection of prisons thrived. The poor people that were sent there didn't thrive so much. Many of them died. They weren't given proper food. They would have been worked in the cold. And of course they were worked basically to death. Many of them, some survived. Yeah. Anyway, I promise some of you folks out there might think I threatened if you subscribe to the majority academic view of what about uniformitarianism versus catastrophism, or the accepted chronology for Egypt, ancient Egypt, and by extension the archaeology of not just the Middle East but all the way into India on one side and into Greece at the very least on the other side, going roughly from east to west. So I'm kind of focused on the Gulf of Mexico here. Golfo maybe is what this is in Spanish, something like that. Probably got it wrong, but who knows. So let's do a little review. I was talking about an impact site, roughly 30 south and 61 east. Dated roughly to 2350 BC. Calibrated carbon dating, and the trouble with calibration is it's based on the misdating of Egyptian history. Already Isaac Newton pointed out, he didn't suggest, he pointed out that there are 400 too many years in Egyptian chronology. And he died. He would have figured it out well before he died. I think the book he wrote on it was published against his will for some reason or not. Maybe 1725, I'm not sure about that date. He died, I believe, 1727, so 95 years before Egyptian hieroglyphs were deciphered. I believe that was 1822, and by a guy who was given credit, Champollion, the guy who did the real work of figuring things out, not the detail. Champollion went through and made the detailed sort of one-to-one correspondence for sounds, but the guy who figured it out, that it was a phonetic language as much as just a picture language. The pictures are used generally as determinants to indicate what the phonetic sound referred to. For example, R, no vowel. R can refer to mouth, or it can refer to, I think it means two, roughly, the preposition to. And so, like if a mouth is put there, you know how to read it. Actually, the mouth thing is the thing that, I think they put something like a scroll as a determinant if it was just what are called function words or something like that. Now, 95 years before hieroglyphs were deciphered, he pointed out, it's obvious, plain as the scarred nose on my face, that there's too many years. It's actually, I'm taking his calculations as a minimum figure, because he was looking at the equivalent of 4, it's really 5, but 2 in tandem, 5 king lists from Greece. I said, there's just not enough beef here. And so he said, well, the average reign length of a king, you see, like he used the present as the key to the past. I think he looked at the Persian Empire, a variety of different traditions and histories and stuff like that. Unfortunately, what inflated his stats somewhat, he went with 20 years average for a king. For China, it's maybe 13, I used to think it was 13.7, but I think it's even lower than that, average reign length. So That's the best, longest continuous tradition we've got. It stretches back from 1911. That's when they got rid of their kings, and then they ended up with tyrants and stuff like that, a la Mao Zedong. Chiang Kai-shek was pretty mild by comparison with Mao Zedong. Very mild, I should say. At any rate, from 1911 back to 722. This is a year-by-year count, 722 BC. And I believe it's less than 13.7 years average per king in China. That's an amazing tradition they've got, and it's valuable. Already, when I started doing research in ancient history, I was going, what is it? And I thought, at first, it's got to be about 30 years, average. Or so we're told, the average length of a generation. And then I started looking at actual reliable chronology, and I'm going, no, it's way less. And like for the heyday of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, located in the northern part of present-day Iraq, well, that's where the center was. I mean, eventually they spread into Egypt. Well, and the Assyriologists don't understand how far they went into Turkey. They were claiming to take tribute from all the way from, they called it Nidu-Ki, that would be Indu-Ki, that's India. Of course, the poor Assyriologists say that's Bahrain. I think that's right there, island in the Persian Gulf. Its products, they say, they were getting transshipped from India through Nidu-Ki, that would be Bahrain. I'm going, yeah, okay. They recognize it's the main gold and elephant ivory. So let's just let's use Occam's razor here. There's no documentation, I don't think, of Bahrain being called anything like Nidu-Ki. Ki just means land. You drop that up, you got Nidu, you got N and a D. My sister actually figured out, like in the Bible, Cain, probably a legendary or even mythic figure, was exiled to a place east of Eden. East of Eden. And it was called the land of Nod. And she said, the land of Nod is India. And I was going, wow, that's genius. You know why? Because it's simple, but I never thought of it. Now, what is Eden? Eden is actually, the Sumerians were located kind of at the head of the Persian Gulf here. And Eden is a word for plain. Like the high plains, low plains, stuff like that, plain. And if you look in the Bible, I know a lot of you would want to. If you look in the Bible, you'll find out that there are 4 rivers mentioned running through Eden. 2 of them are, we know, Tigris. I think the old word for it is Diglat or something like that. The Greeks really screwed that one up, They changed an L into an R, so on and so forth. And T to an S. It's pretty amazing what happens going from one language to another when they're not related. And the Euphrates. I think it's still called the Furat or something like that. You can't see the connection with Euphrates. Well, maybe you shouldn't go into linguistics or anything related. Anyway, there are 2 others mentioned. And one mentions, I think it's a river that comes from Havilah, the land of gold. And it looks as though it would be some sort of thing in here. So far as I can tell, there are no permanent rivers there anymore. But, there are signs that maybe there were lakes in Africa, in the Sahara, I should say, in the northern part of Africa. Not the most extreme part, not along here. And way back when. So maybe there's been a lot of desiccation. Anyway, the land of gold. So it's somewhere over here. And the 4th one is the interesting one, because you know how you can triangulate things. This kind of helps triangulate. It's called the Bible of Gihon, or Gihon, however you want to mispronounce it. Gihon. Might be accent on the last syllable. Hebrew tends to like that. accenting the last syllable. And I was looking at a map of Mesopotamia, and right there, bold as brass, it would be a classical name. So I'm not concerned about the S. The S would be added at the end. In other words, it would be either Greek or Latin name, or a Latinization of a Greek name. And understand there's going to be differences. Idiglat, Tigris. When you're going from one language that's not related to another language that's not related. And it's called Gindis. And I'm going, holy smokes. Oh man, there it is. Why they haven't figured it out, I don't know. So it basically comes into, from the, see how the one river comes from the west, from Havilah, and then the other one comes from the east, and the other ones run kind of north-south, Tigris and Euphrates. Yeah, they kind of on a bit of an angle there. But we really don't have to find out what the dry riverbed is that was the river mentioned in Genesis as being one of the rivers flowing through Eden, because we've got the Gindis. And I believe it's the Diala, which is a fairly large river coming from, I believe it comes from the Zagros Mountains off to the east of Iraq. And the nice thing is it comes right in where the Tigris and Euphrates, they start off very close to each other, and then they diverge. The Euphrates comes almost to the Mediterranean, and then they converge again, right around present-day Baghdad. That's near the ancient capital of Babylon. And, Kish, which was an Akkadian type of kingdom before the Akkadians existed, Semitic. In other words, the folks there were related to the Arabians, the Hebrews, Syrians. I understand the native language of Syria is not Arabic, nor of Lebanon, no. Of Jordan, no. Of area south of Jordan, no. There used to be a language called Edomite, south of, in the southern part of Jordan. Ammon is named after the Ammonites. It's related to Arabic, but it's not the same language. The native language of Lebanon was Phoenician. Native language of Syria, Aramaic. Native language as of Iraq, where once Sumerian got wiped out by a very bad disaster roughly 4,000 years ago, and just became a dead language, basically something like a liturgical language and literary language. Were Assyrian and Babylonian. The Assyrians still exist. So far as I know, pretty well anyone who identifies as an Assyrian is a Christian. Of course, ISIS had a real fun old time with those folks. The Assyrians didn't have so much fun when ISIS was ethnically cleansing / genociding them. Yeah, this is in this century, incidentally. Yeah, the natives of Egypt, incidentally, the ones that you still could identify as native, they have kind of as their liturgical language called Coptic. And it's obviously it was used by the guy who deciphered ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Coptic, to decipher the hieroglyphs. Why? Because it's related to it. It's kind of like it's a descendant of. And those folks, the Copts, are Christians. And a much persecuted minority. So much for the idea. You look what happened to the Assyrians and with ISIS, and what's happening in Egypt now with the fundamentalists whacking Copts and doing whatever to them. So much for the idea of Muslim tolerance, as far as I'm concerned. You can only have to look at, see what happens in Turkey with Armenians. The Armenians are the closest there is to native people here. They're Christians. And they've been genocided by the Turks 3 times. And the last time was close to when my dad was born. Oh, my dad, you're an old fogey, James, and your dad, well, he's long, no, he died 2 years ago. Okay? He almost made it to 100 years. But yeah, genocided the natives. So much for Muslim tolerance. The first time it was kind of a traditional, I think it was in the 1890s. And then the second time it was the Young Turks, were kind of like nationalists. Third time it was kind of Nazi commies under a dude called Ataturk, father of the Turks. He's actually, I think, something like a Macedonian. So he was born over in Europe. He was a Muslim. A lot of people don't realize the Muslims actually spread into Europe. Check and see these areas, land areas. If we leave Russia out of or the Soviet Union out of consideration, the Muslim Empire extended all the way through Yugoslavia, Hungary, and Romania. So this hunk of area, compare that with France, it's bigger than France. The Ottoman Empire, you see all this stuff Turkish? Now, the Turkish Empire, like up until World War II, extended down here to the holy cities of Islam, Mecca and Medina, and it spread maybe to Tunisia. I've forgotten exactly where the boundary line. When you see a huge, big, sprawling empire and stuff like that. This is the breakdown of the Muslim Empire in here. Was the cause of World War I. We nifty, shifty, hefty lefties are always going around saying, oh, the cause was European colonialism. No, it was the breakdown of Muslim, i.e. Ottoman or Turkish colonialism in Europe, a place where they had no business being. I'll show you where the Turks originated. You've got Turkic kind of people in Azerbaijan nowadays, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, see Turk in there, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Tajikistan, that's Indo-European. The Tajiks speak Indo-European, so they're not closely related to the Turks, if related at all. And so you've got some Turks in the northern part, or Turkic kind of people, related to Turks, northern part of Afghanistan. You even got, I have a doctor who comes from, they got Ashgabat, Mashhad. She comes from there, and she's a very learned individual. She's pretty darn good in English. I understand her quite well. She's actually served as a doctor in Italy, so obviously she had to learn Italian well enough to do that. She'd know Iranian. She's a native, or Persian. She's a native of Iran. Persian is the official language of that area. And she also, there are some Turks, or Turkmen people, located in the northeastern part of Iran, so she learned that language as well. Pretty fascinating. We're lucky to have her. Many people who come from the Middle East, we're very unlucky to have. And, that's people who believe in Sharia law. 100% of it. And, you find very few people who believe in, I just believe in this part of the Sharia law. I think I'll just let the other fall into abeyance. Incidentally, it should be pointed out, there's a Persian Empire. Iran is still an empire. You got the Baluchis here, Baluchistan. They're a different kind of people. You've got the Turkmen up here. They probably don't have much business being there. And then you've got Kurds around Lake Urmia, I think is how we say it. Oromia, I think is how the Persians say it. Something like that, with an O there instead of a U. And up here you've got people who don't really have much business being there. You got Azerbaijan. Here we've got it here officially, but the Azerbaijanians extend into Iran. They're basically Turkic kind of people. They came much later. Where they came from is up here in Russia. Okay, so that's Siberia. That's where they came from originally. Then they got on horses. I presume it was horses, and they stomped here. Now this is kind of like semi-arid. You kind of got, it's borderline desert, parts of these areas. The Soviets, incidentally, when they had political prisoners or whatever, they'd send a lot of them out east here. They'd send some of them up to places like Norilsk up here, where they were working in extreme cold, worked to death. And but they'd send a lot of folks to Soviet Central Asia, which is this area. They sent a whole nation called, they've been in the news even now, Chechens. So located in this area, and capital of Grozny. And there's a Greek name, Stavropol. Stavro would be Greek for cross. Paul would be short for Polis, city. Cross city. And so this is where the Turks come from. A lot of people, nifty, shifty, hefty, lefty, say, like it's a response, a Muslim tendency to well, they don't like the word terrorism, even though Lenin loved the term revolutionary terrorism, because it's so evil when you actually look at the results. But they'll say, like insurgency or whatever. Is a response to colonialism. You know how many times Turkey's been the Turks, I should say, have been colonized? Zero. Now these folks here were, they were colonizers. They were Turks that came from here. Turkic people came from here. They were ultimately colonized by the Russians, but that's the only time. The Arabians, they were colonized by the Turks, the fellow Muslims, but just this stretch along the Red Sea. You'll notice how you got Jeddah there. They've got Medina here and Mecca. See how close they are? Yeah, they were just concerned about the holy cities. This area in here, no one's ever colonized. The Arabs and the Turks are the ultimate colonizers because they've never been colonized. The English were colonized by Norse people called Normans. They were Vikings who conquered the northern part of France around 911 AD. About 150 years later, one of their descendants came and conquered England. Okay, and the English before then had been conquered by this area had been conquered by, it's basically Celtic, had been conquered by people coming from Germany, parts of Holland, and the mainland of Denmark, and islands off of those three countries. Little geography and history lesson. I think a lot of people will be weeping and gnashing their teeth, to use a biblical phrase. But anyway, back to the job at hand, which is these impact zones. Roughly 60 east, 30 south. The one that doesn't interest me that much because so far as I can see, no historical implications. Gulf of Carpentaria, however it's mispronounced or pronounced. This bight taken out of Australia. And then I'm not sure when the date would be, but one right in the center, kind of like the Persian Gulf, I suspect that was 2350 BC, calibrated 1850 roughly. BC. Uncalibrated radiocarbon. I'm not interested in any calibrated dates for radiocarbon. I'm only interested in the raw dates. The calibration is basically involves adding numbers to the date in order to comply with the laws laid down by Egyptologists. And the fourth one I wanted to mention, I didn't get a chance to mention it yesterday, is somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm sure these folks working with Dallas Abbott have pointed out that that's, they say, dated to roughly 700 BC. And I don't think they really calibrate